Welcome everybody. It's nice to see a lot of people here on a Sunday morning. What I want to talk about today is, I know one of the main questions you get when you actually start teaching meditation is, and a main difficulty people actually have is, I can't keep my thoughts still. I continue to think while I meditate. And always when you give people advice in this, it's like, well, it's okay. It's not really, essentially that's not the goal of meditation. You can do meditation without your thoughts stopping in some way. But while I give that advice to a lot of people, but that doesn't negate the fact that these states actually are available, that you can access these states of stillness where the thoughts and seemingly perceptions actually seem to cease in some way. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is these states of mind where we reach this level of stillness, where there is cessation of thoughts, and maybe even cessation of perceptions or particular kinds of perceptions. These states that we might call states of contentless experience. Now, these states are actually they're really interesting. They're generating a lot of interest lately, and the reason they're generating a lot of interest is well, how can these states actually be possible? How can you have a state that's contentless? How can you have a state where no concepts arise? How can you have a state that has no thoughts or perceptions in it? If there's a state where no perceptions are there, how are you actually perceiving that state? If it's contentless, how do you know that something's actually happening? Is this a state of something like absolute cessation? How could you even remember something like that if you weren't even perceiving it? So I'm going to do my best today to actually talk about this topic, and essentially I'm going to be going over a few main questions, and the main sort of questions I will be going over is exactly what these states are, how we actually describe them, these states of stillness, these states of contentless experience, these states of silence. What's it like to be in these states? So what is the quality of the mind in those states? How do you actually get to those states? What's the path of getting to those states? And what are some of the main difficulties and what are some of the main obstacles to actually achieving some of these states? Now, if I'm going to wade into these waters, I need to I need to throw some caveats out there right at the start. How I'm going to be describing some of these states today, I'm actually going to be doing it from the conceptualization of the way that the Thai forest tradition actually understands these kinds of states. Now, and the reason I'm doing this is because this is the tradition that I'm most familiar with. And one thing I think we have to remember when we're thinking about something like the Thai forest tradition, I'm ordained in the Thai forest tradition. I'm a Westerner. I'm not Thai. One of the things we have to remember is that with the Thai forest tradition, there's a truly, what you could say, a truly Thai conceptualization of the Thai forest tradition, where that does rely a lot on these, what we call the Ajahns, these great masters in this tradition. And they have a particular kind of way of explaining some of these things. But then there's the Western version of the Thai forest tradition. And I think this is what most of us are quite familiar with. We have a lot of translated books and all these kinds of things. I'm going to be leaning, and we also have a lot of monks, and monks are giving explanations of these things. I'm going to be leaning more towards the Thai conceptualization of these things. So it might be a little bit different to what you're used to hearing. The other caveat to this is that I need to talk about is that I'm going to also try to be as balanced and as ecumenical as I can possibly be. While I'm going to lean a lot on the Thai forest interpretation of this, I am going to be drawing on things like the the Pali Canon. I'm going to be drawing on things like the commentary. I'm also going to be drawing on Nagarjuna's writings about these different kinds of states. So you're going to have to strap in. It's going to be a bit dense today, but you know that's sometimes dense is fun. And let's actually see if we're talking about something that is really, really fun, like these states of stillness. Hopefully, it can be sort of informative in some way. So, with that, well, what are these states of stillness? What are these states of contentless experiences? What are these states of absolute silence within the mind? And again, if we think about the Thai forest tradition, as I said, remember that the Thai version of the Thai forest tradition, what the Thai forest tradition really tries to do, it does try to lean on some of the earlier Buddhist writings, but it does take a lot of its interpretations of these different kinds of states from maybe the later commentaries, things like the Visuddhimagga, but it also really relies quite heavily on a lot of the Thai commentaries on these states, things like the Pubbasika. But the main thing that the Thai forest tradition really relies on with this is the teachers in the lineage, the kind of oral transmission from the teachers and the teachers' explanations, what we call the Kubarajans, and these are the kind of the big names. There's Ajahn Mun, who's seen as the grandfather of this tradition. There's people like Ajahn Sao, Ajahn Kao, Ajahn Lumpur Wan, Lumpur Lee, Tanpo Lee, who's quite well known in the West. Also, people like monks like Ajahn Mahabua, and a lot of you are quite familiar with Ajahn Chah. So it's really based a lot on their explanations of what these kinds of states are actually like. And so when we think of the Thai forest tradition, there's three big terms that we actually need to keep in mind when we're thinking about anything with the Thai forest tradition. Those three big terms are the kilesas, which are the kind of mental defilements, the things that cover the mind over, the obscure, like the obstructions to a pure mind. One big thing in the Thai forest tradition is what we call the jit, or the chitta in Pali. The jit in Thai means like a heart, but it also means the mind as well. So these two things they're very, very interconnected. The heart and mind, it's the same kind of thing. Now, the heart and the mind, this jit in Thai, it can actually mean a mind that's covered over with the kilesas. So you can have these, thoughts going all over the place, bothering the mind. But jit, or the chitta, can actually, what we talk about a lot in the Thai forest tradition, it's this state of the mind that is this pure knowing, this is the knowing awareness. A lot of times what they talk about in Thai is the puru, the one who knows. And so when we talk about the chitta in Thai, it's a lot of times talking about this kind of pure awareness. And the last thing in Thai, what we talk about a lot in these, to get towards these states, is we just talk about samadhi. Samadhi as this very blanket and very, very broad term. And we talk a lot about just the development of samadhi. Now, again, the Thai conceptualization of these things, when we look at the Western Thai conceptualizations, they do lean into a lot of the things of the jhanas and all these kinds of things. But the Thai tradition as such, it does mention it a little bit. People like Tanpo Lee, he would talk about the jhanas a little bit. Generally, they don't really talk about the jhanas. The Thai forest tradition don't talk about the jhanas that much. Instead, what they talk about more is just, as I said, just the development of samadhi, and having samadhi in three different levels. The first level is what we call kanika samadhi, and this is described as very momentary, just brief concentration, brief samadhi. Then you have what's called upajara samadhi, which is this more, it's a little bit more sustained, but it's essentially it's translated as like access concentration or neighborhood concentration. And this is like samadhi that's a little bit longer. But then what you have is something called appana samadhi. So the third level, and this appana samadhi is described as being this state of absorption. Now, the way samadhi works in the Thai forest tradition, we just talk about just developing samadhi and trying to move through these different states. And if one can actually get to this state of Anapanasati, this state of absorption, this is where, if we remember the citta, if it's covered over with defilements, it starts to gather together. The mind, the citta starts to gather together, and it becomes very pure and radiant in this state of Anapanasati. And this is where the knowing citta arises. This state of pure, unadulterated, knowing awareness actually arises. And so essentially we have these. This is when you get into this state of Anapanasati. This was potentially where these states of stillness, these states of no thoughts or no perceptions arising, could be coming about, and I'll get to why they could be coming about in that state. Now, as I mentioned as well, the Thai forest tradition really does rely on a lot of the commentary material. So how do we actually tie what the Thai things are saying to things like the commentary? And if you look at something like the Visuddhimagga does talk about these three different levels of samadhi: Khanika, Upajjhara, and Apanasamadhi. But one thing the Thai forest tradition has done, we've missed one of the steps. In the Visuddhimagga, there's actually another step which is sort of, don't need it, it's fine, don't have to worry about it. But so in the Visuddhimagga, you have Khanika Samadhi, which is again very momentary, just very, very brief. Then you have Parikamma Samadhi, whereas this is more sustained on an object for a period of time. Then you have Upajjhara Samadhi, and in the Visuddhimagga, it talks about Upajjhara Samadhi here. This is where the 5 hindrances start to become dispelled to some way, and you start to access the jhanas. So the Visuddhimagga describes these states more along the lines of the jhanas. And so this is essentially why they call it access, because you're starting to access the jhanas in these states. And when you get to Apanasamadhi in the Visuddhimagga's conceptualization, this is where the four jhanas become a lot more stabilized. So you could start to see how, okay, maybe the Thai version has sort of taken something from the Visuddhimagga that may be tying back to the jhanas, but again, the Thai forest tradition doesn't talk too much about the jhanas so much. So if we're continuing to think about what these states of stillness are, these states of contentless awareness actually are, well, what does the Pali Canon say about these things? And here is what I'm going to take the caveat of saying is like, look, when you talk about what is pretty prominent in the Pali Canon is the development of the jhanas. This is Samma Samadhi. There's a lot of people that have a lot of different interpretations of the jhanas. You have your different schools, different traditions talking about it. This person says they're like this, another person says they're like that. There's these things at the moment going on called the jhana wars. I don't know how severe they are, but essentially for myself, I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in trying to understand these states of stillness or these states of contentless awareness, and maybe how these are conceptualized in the Pali Canon. So when I'm talking about the jhanas here, all I'm talking about is maybe the way that I've understood them from the way that they're actually being portrayed in the suttas. And so what these states of stillness or the stillness of thoughts could be in the jhanas. Some people argue that the jhanas are full absorption. Some people argue that you can still investigate in it. Again, I'm not trying to get into those kinds of debates, but what it could be in terms of the jhanas is something along the lines of when you access the second jhana. Now, in the second jhana, what you abandon in that state is something we call vitakka and vichara, which is applied and sustained thought. And you're left with piti, which is the rapture of the mind. You're left with sukha, which is a non-sensory pleasure of the body. and you also have ekagata as well, which is a unification of the mind. And the other quality that the jhana actually has, the second jhana has, is what's it called? Sampasadana, which is like stillness, which is tranquility. So we could maybe say that the second jhana, this is where you're actually getting these states of stillness of thoughts. Again, I don't want to get into exactly who said what and who has different interpretation. This is just the way that I read it. I'm not really that interested in sort of saying different things about it. But one thing we maybe could be a little bit more, so there could be debate about this of like, well, what is the second jhana? Is it actually, are thoughts and perceptions ceasing in that? There could be debates around that. That's fine. That's all well and good. But one thing that we could probably be a little bit more sure of is when you look in the Pali Canon about the arupa jhanas, which are the more with what we call the formless jhanas. And in these kinds of jhanas, definitely thoughts and perceptions would be ceasing, and these would be truly contentless experiences. And in these, in the arupa jhanas, you have where this would definitely be happening is something like the seventh arupa jhana, which is the jhana of infinite nothingness, which is so cool to actually think of if you could actually get this thing, and the eighth jhana of neither perception or non-perception. And this is so the thoughts and perceptions would be stilled in those kinds of states. But again, this raises the concern. If there's no you're neither having perception or non-perception, what does that actually mean? How can you perceive something that's not there? How could you remember something that's not there? So, and with that, I don't really know, but it is very, very cool to sort of think about these things. What this ties well to as well, and another conceptualization of what these states of stillness and could actually be, is by a writer called Nagarjuna. And anybody that isn't familiar with Nagarjuna, go and read it. Nagarjuna is fantastic. He's phenomenal. Really deep and detailed analysis, not only in the states of meditation, but also an interpretation of the original Pali as well. And so Nagarjuna was one of the leaders of the Madhyamika tradition, who was the inceptor of the Madhyamika tradition. And when he talks about states of stillness of thoughts, it's sort of like the Thai interpretation where you have those three levels: Kanika, Upajara, and Anapanasati. But he extends that a little bit to sort of maybe even build on top of Anapanasati, where he starts to talks about the three doors to liberation. And what's the word here? Vimokkha Sammukha, the three doors to liberation. And these are different states of samadhi that you could be getting these kinds of absolute stillness of thoughts and perceptions. And the first stage that he talks about is what he calls animita samadhi, which is signless samadhi. And essentially what this means in Nagarjuna's conceptualization is that one realizes that all dhammas have no object in them. There is no object that is present there in that state of samadhi. The second one is apranita samadhi, which is it's aimless samadhi. And what this essentially means is that there's nothing in the fore. There's nothing there in front of one. How he conceptualizes this state of samadhi is that there's no becoming, there's no being, there's no bhava. There's no bhava in terms of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. And the last state of samadhi that he talks about is a sunyata samadhi, which is such a cool interpretation of what this is the emptiness samadhi. And what he describes emptiness samadhi as is one realizes that all dhammas and all objects and absolutely everything is empty. And that everything within the five khandhas is empty of some kind of self-nature. And this is a state of samadhi that he talks about. So there's all these different conceptualizations of what we could be talking about when we're talking about this absolute stillness of thoughts and perceptions, these contentless experiences in meditation. As I said, this stuff's dense. You don't have to remember all this. I just find this stuff like quite interesting. So, it's take it or leave it kind of thing. So, essentially, what we would okay, here's all these lists and all these kinds of things. It's like, okay, you're starting to bore me. Like, you're really starting to bore me now. But what's it like to be in these states? Now, again, I have to make another massive caveat here. Again, I am leaning very heavily on the Thai forest interpretation. I'm going to lean on the suttas. I'm going to lean on the Pali Canon. I'm not making some kind of claim that I have these things. Again, I'm leaning on these different traditions, and that's why I have some notes. So, essentially, what are these states like for the Thai forest tradition? So, if you look at some of these great teachers and the way that they talk about them, they talk about this state of Anapanasati as being a point where all perceptions of the body and all perceptions within the mind start to drop away. They're not there anymore. When all perceptions and formations drop away in the mind, you're left with this state of pure knowing awareness. Again, the pure citta. This is a state where things are just innately radiant and innately pure, and they're solitary, and there's nothing that obstructs them in these states. Within this state of the pure citta, there's no content within that. It's just awareness itself. It's just the knowing itself. There's no objects within this state. There's no subject within this state. There's no duality within this state. There's no subject or no object. There is just the state of awareness, the pure citta itself as it is. It's all pervasive, and it's not to say that in that state that perception and consciousness doesn't exist, but what I think it's implying is that consciousness is all pervasive at that time. There is nothing but pure consciousness at that time. So this is when to arrive at this state, one has to, as I said, to get through the defilements. And the way that some of these teachers describe it is of this pure citta, this one who knows, this puru, this knowing, is that this is a state that is always and ever present, that it's timeless, that it can. Somebody like Ajahn Mahabua says this is a state of the mind, the pure citta. It can never be born and it never dies. It is this pure underlying state of what we are. And if you think about this conceptualization, this is really cool, because actually what it ties to is a lot of the, you could say, like the Zen interpretations of this, or the Mahayana interpretations of something like Buddha nature, that we have it within us already, but we just can't access it, or we don't know how to access it. And these Thai forest masters saying that something like developing samadhi will allow us to actually access these things. So it's really cool, and it's this state where, as I said, that all perceptions of the body, and all knowing of the body, actually everything just drops away, and you're just left with this knowing that's there. But what? Again, okay, so that's the Thai forest interpretation of this thing. Well, what do maybe something like the Pali Canon talk about this? And as if you remember, I talked about maybe this could be analogous to something like that's happening maybe in the second jhana. And if we remember what the second jhana is, what that is simply this piti, this rapture of the mind that is pervasive. There's the sukha. There's this happiness of non-sensual pleasure of the body There is Sampada, which is this tranquility, this stillness of the mind, and ekakata, which is this unification of the mind. So if you think about what the second jhana is, maybe that could give you an interpretation of what these states actually might be like. Now, this is all, obviously this sounds great, to get to the essential knowing nature of the mind and the mind in its pure natural state, or get into the second jhana or something. It's like, this is awesome. Like, how do I actually get that thing then? And so the next question is, well, what's the path? How do you actually do that? How do you get to that? And so while I've like just bombarded you with technicalities this morning so far, this is actually where the Thai forest tradition is really, really good, because it's really, really simple. They don't think in many of these terms of different levels of jhana and all these kinds of things. It's very simple. All they think about focusing on is getting to these states. It's a simple process of samadhi jalan panya and panya jalan samadhi, which means samadhi develops panya and panya develops samadhi, or concentration develops wisdom and wisdom develops concentration. So it's just this very symbiotic nature between these two kinds of practices that we need to keep doing. And, well, how do we actually develop samadhi in terms of the Thai forest tradition? Again, the Thai forest tradition. Really, really simply, actually. It's probably the most simple meditation technique that's available there. All they talk about doing most of the time is just developing a simple mantra, Butto. Just doing Butto over and over and over and over again. So when we sit meditation, we just internally recite Butto, Butto, Butto. Whenever we walk meditation, we do Butto, like one step, Butto, 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 Butto. Whenever you walk, whenever you're moving around, whenever you're grabbing something, it's Butto, Butto. It's just continually over and over again. A lot of the Thai forest tradition talks about also developing Anapanasati, developing mindfulness of breathing as well. But they really do tie it to using this mantra as well, Butto. As you're breathing in, you think But, out, To, Butto. Or you could just go Butto, 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 Butto. So the development of samadhi in the Thai forest tradition is just do this one thing. Now, when I started like going to see and I've actually met a lot of these really, really great teachers, and it's a little bit infuriating as a Westerner going to these places, because you go, can you give me some advice on some meditation? And they're like, just do Butto. It's like, okay, I'll go off and I'll do that, and I'll go and do Butto, 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 and then I'll think about ice cream and all these kinds of things, and come back a few weeks later, I'm like, John, what do I do next? And they're like, can you do Butto all the time? No, not at all. Just keep doing that then. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Okay, go back again. What's the next step? Have you done the Butto yet? Nope. Keep doing it. So it's pretty simple. It's just do the one thing over and over and over and over again. And so we have this way to develop samadhi. Just doing this one simple thing over and over again. But this is balanced by developing wisdom as well, developing panya as well. And what the Thai forest tradition talks about quite a lot is, you might think, developing wisdom, developing insight into the nature of self or the nature of mind and all these kinds of things. The Thai forest tradition doesn't really lean into that much at all. What they talk about when developing wisdom is developing wisdom within the sphere of the body. Just contemplating the body. That's all again, really simple. That's all you need to do. Contemplate the body. Develop samadhi, contemplate the body. Develop samadhi, contemplate the body. That's all you have to do. We talk about this in terms of developing what we call a subha kammatthana, which is the unbeautiful nature of the body. So thinking about the hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, the internal organs, all these kinds of things. We talk about developing marananusati, which is the recollection of death and how the body will go through periods of decay, or recollecting that the body is just made up of essential elements. So the Thai forest tradition, it really is just this balance of developing something like Buddho, and then maybe developing wisdom towards investigating the body in this way. So when one actually does this, and so how do we actually develop Buddho, and how do we develop Buddho, and how do we develop the wisdom with these kind of bodily practices? How does that actually start to work? Well, the way it's described is that again, if we remember the chitta, it's the way they conceptualize it, it's always flowing out, and it's always covered over with things, and it's always moving out into the world. And so what we're trying to do by just developing Buddho is to gather it in together and make it converge and not let it go out so much. So the more we develop Buddho, the more it actually starts to converge within. The more that we can stay with Buddho and the more it starts to converge, it will start to move into these periods of Khanika Samadhi where it maybe just stops just for a moment. Buddho, 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 and everything sort of drops away, but just for a moment. But then you have to go, mind starts to move again, you have to go back, Buddho, 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 Buddho. And eventually you'll start to move into, you can keep the mind still for longer. And what happens when the mind converges more and more on something like Buddho or even the breath, eventually you're going to get to the point where this drops away. Buddho drops away or the breath drops away and it all disappears. And it's at these states where the pure citta starts to arise. But essentially, again, if you remember what I said, when the kinds of instructions you get, even if you got up to something like this, you go back to the teacher and go, well, what do I do next? It's keep doing that. Just keep doing it more. You haven't really reached the proper point yet. Because samadhi at something like an upajjhara, Khanika or an upajjhara stage, they're still seen as very unstable. It can come and it can go a lot. So you're encouraged just to keep practicing with Buddho until you can get to the point where you reach something like Anapanasati, where you're practicing with Buddho, you're practicing with the breath. And eventually things really do start to drop away and you drop into this absorption state. And it's at that state, again, this is where the pure citta emerges. And when you're in this kind of state, the meditation takes a life of its own. There's no real controlling it anymore. Buddho's dropped away or the breath's dropped away. And if you remember, I said all perceptions of the body, all perceptions within the mind, all thoughts within everything, all that just drops away, and all there is left is this knowing awareness of the citta. And so what do they recommend that you do at that point? Well, if you can get to that point, it's awesome and it's great. But then one turns one's attention towards the citta and just rests as the citta turns their awareness to awareness itself. And just rests and remains there and can rest and remain in this state. And so essentially this is what we have to continue to try to do until our samadhi becomes very, very stable and you can actually stay in these states of samadhi all throughout the day. All throughout the day, and even when you go to sleep, you can remain in these states of samadhi. These things are seen as possible. So this is the Thai forest interpretation, but if you remember, there's the Western Thai forest interpretation as well for many monastics and communities that we know and love. They do lean a little bit more maybe on the suttas and things like that. So what do the suttas say and the Pali Canon? What does that say about how we develop these states? Well, this is where we start to move into things. We can start to look at things like the Anapanasati Sutta, and where the Buddha actually talks about the development of Anapanasati and how you develop Anapanasati. The Buddha talks about 16 kind of steps that you can go through, or he calls them the 4 triads, I think they are, where essentially you practice mindfulness of breathing, and these different steps are something along the lines of, a meditator, when he breathes in long, he knows he breathes out long. When he breathes out long, knows he breathes out long. Breathes in short, knows it. Breathes out short, knows it. Breathes in, recognizing the bodily perceptions. Breathes out, calming the bodily fabrications, I actually think it is. Moving into things like, then it can sort of get to steps where it says, And I think maybe this might be a step where you could say it's maybe the stillness and the contentlessness in the seventh and eighth step of the Anapanasati Sutta, where the Buddha talks about breathing in, I still mental formation. Breathing in, I experience mental formations. Breathing out, breathing in, I experience mental formations. And the next step is breathing in, breathing out, I calm mental formations. And what mental formations are citta, sankhara. And again, if you remember the Thai interpretation, citta is this big thing. The citta is the mind, citta is the heart, sankhara is some kind of formation on top of that. So we could see that, you know, the Buddha, when he's talking about Anapanasati, going through these different steps of the Anapanasati is the way that we develop these states of stillness. Also, once one moves through the Anapanasati stages of Anapanasati, you know, what you're doing in that point as well is you're abandoning the 5 hindrances in the mind. And this is, you could say, one of the main obstructions to your meditation. And the 5 hindrances, just for anybody that doesn't know, the first hindrance is sensual desire or kamacchanta. The second one is, ill will. The third is lethargy and dullness. Third is restlessness, is it? Third is restlessness. Yeah, so restlessness and worry, which is, Uddhacca, kukucca, yeah, and the last is doubt. So, but the fourth one then is sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor is not a good word. It's more, lethargy and dullness. Yeah, tinamitta. Yeah, lethargy and dullness. So we have to try to. What we're trying to do through the development of something like Anapanasati is to let go of the 5 hindrances in the mind. It's not entirely sure how the 5 hindrances are attached to something like the jhana, but this is, if you do look in the Visuddhimagga, the Visuddhimagga actually starts to join the factors of jhana into the abandonment of the 5 hindrances. And so in the Visuddhimagga it talks about if we remember vitakka, which is applied thought. This counteracts lethargy and dullness, and vichara, which is sustained thought. This counteracts doubt and uncertainty. Piti, which is the rapture, it counteracts ill will. And it says in the Visuddhimagga that sukha, the non-sensual pleasure, counteracts restlessness and worry, and ekaggata, counter this one-pointedness of mind, counteracts sensory desire. And I'm not sure if my notes are wrong here, but I don't know, my sort of thought, and I don't know, maybe we can talk about this later, but yeah, maybe like sukha, that you're developing in the jhanas, like you'd think that might sort of counteract something like sensory desire. So a non-sensual pleasure would counteract the outflowing of wanting for some kind of sensual pleasures. But I don't know, maybe I've wrote the thing down wrong, but anyway. So the other path that I sort of wanted to talk about as well, other thing of leading towards this is, again, Nagarjuna's conceptualizations of these things is so cool, and it's for anybody that hasn't looked at it. I recommend actually looking at it. And so when Nagarjuna talks about these things, he actually starts to talk about what is called, if you remember what I was talking about, it's called the animitta samadhi. Now, I know there's a lot of people that talk about, develop the jhanas and you develop the nimitta and all these kinds of things, but Nagarjuna talks about that the first stage of samadhi is this animitta samadhi. And actually also as well, if we look at the Pali Canon, the Buddha, and I'm indebted to a monastic friend that brought this up for me, that the Buddha actually talks about animitta samadhi a lot as well, developing the objectless samadhi. I'll read a few things here when the Buddha talks about it. The Buddha says, like with objectless samadhi, this is by not focusing on any object, a monk attains objectless concentration. This is called objectless liberation of the mind.
Monks, it's sufficient reason to practice objectless concentration. When objectless concentration is practiced and magnified, is of great fruit and benefit. And it sort of seems like the Buddha equates animita samadhi with something like Nagarjuna's sunyata or sunyato samadhi, with emptiness. So there's a passage where the Buddha talks about monks. What is the path to the unconditioned emptiness concentration, objectless concentration, and undirected concentration? Monks, this is called the path to the unconditioned. And he talks about practice objectless meditation in order to discard self-identity. One who has broken through self-identity walks in peace. And so you can maybe see that if you develop this objectless concentration, this animita samadhi, this might be a path to seeing through the illusion of self. This might be the path to dispelling all thoughts and perceptions that are in the mind. So we have the ways that we can actually do this. There's the Thai forest way. There's the way that we find in the suttas, and the way that the Nagarjuna talks about doing these things. And these are all, this is all really cool. It's like, well, great. This is, for me, when I started meditating, it's like, that's what I want. Like, if I can do that thing, that's what I actually want out of this whole practice. But what are some of the difficulties? What are some of the obstacles there for us? Well, the biggest obstacles to actually developing these states of mind is, again, the outflowing of the mind, that the mind gets caught up in the world. The mind is always going out into wanting objects and things in the world. If you want to develop the objectless concentration, one has to retreat from those things. Essentially, what we get pulled around a lot by is something called kama raga, which is attachment to things in the world, the forms that are in the world. This is something that continually gets in our way and pulls us out into the world. If we remember the Thai conceptualization of that the mind is always flowing out. And what we're doing when we're trying to develop this kind of samadhi is to converge and bring it back into this state of stillness. So this constant pull of the external world and our desires for things in the world, this is one of the biggest things that we hindrances or difficulties that we need to overcome in our practice. Essentially, what this is arising from the Thai forest conceptualization, is this is arising from the kilesas within the mind, the defilements within the mind, these things that dilutes the wrong word, is to obscure this pure awareness, the blemishes on the mind. And these kilesas are the things that sort of push us out into the world. And so these are one of our main kind of obstacles. And obviously you can think of things like the 5 hindrances as being an obstacle as well. One of the biggest obstacles as well, though, is actually thinking it's too difficult to do. And when you talk to a lot of people about meditation and you say, oh, just practice Buddha or just practice the breath, it's like, oh, that's a really difficult thing to do. I can't do that. I just like to sit here and just relax and all these kinds of things. So developing these states of samadhi, people think it's really, really difficult to do. But one thing with the Thai forest tradition, Thai people in general, very, very relaxed, very cool, very chilled out, they're very happy kind of people. But when they talk about meditation, it's this real kind of gung-ho, go after it, like practice as hard as you can, do this as much as you can, keep doing it, and really give up everything for the practice. I think there's a different reason why maybe there's the Thai forest interpretation of the way of practice, but then there's the westernized Thai version. I can get into it later, maybe, of why there is a difference there. But essentially, there's a difference in personality there that maybe Westerners don't gravitate too much towards this kind of like just keep punching through and just keep doing this one thing. But essentially, the point I'm trying to get at is we think that these states aren't available. These are too hard to get, or essentially that we just don't put forth enough effort to actually get them. We fall short. Think it's too hard. Okay, I'm just going to try this more relaxing kind of thing. But again, from the Thai forest perspective, is just keep at it. Keep at it. These things actually are available to you. these states are within the purview of human existence. These are within the purview of human capabilities. These states are something that you can actually achieve. And if you keep practicing in this way, you actually will get to them. But you have to continue to practice. You have to give up a lot for the practice. You really have to be serious about the practice, and you really have to try to do this. So with that, that's probably enough of me sort of going on about these things. But just as a recollection, the closing point I'd like to make here is like, so I've talked a lot about the Thai forest tradition and the Thai conceptualization of the Thai forest tradition, and I've also compared that to the Western conceptualization of things that Western is in the Thai forest tradition maybe emphasized, and then we looked at the things like the Pali Canon and the suttas and Nagarjuna. And what people have a tendency to do is go, well, this, here's the differences. Here's the actual differences here, and here's why this other conceptualization is wrong, and here's why my conceptualization is right. And what we get if we actually look at across these different traditions and across these different writers and across these different interpretations is we actually find a lot more similarities than we find differences. There's many, many more similarities between the different schools of Buddhism than there are differences between them. So we should take that into account and recognize that essentially we just have different labels in Buddhism for describing seemingly very, very similar kinds of states. And all this arises is due to different conceptualizations of language, different periods in history where you conceptualize different states in different ways, different terms that we use to describe seemingly what seem like the same things. So instead of thinking of, well, this conceptualization is right and that conceptualization is wrong, this style is right, that style is wrong, this individual is right, that individual is wrong, try to think of the similarities between these things when you're actually practicing to them. And again, just to speak to the Thai forest interpretation of these states, it's actually, I've gone through a lot today, but it's actually like pretty simple. Just keep doing the one thing over and over and over again, and hopefully you'll get to these states. So with that, I'll leave it there for now. Anybody has any kinds of rebuttals, concerns, all these kinds of things, your misunderstandings, you're more than welcome to ask any kinds of questions now, clarifications. I'll do my best to. Anybody that's like, that was just totally wrong, I'm more than happy to hear your thoughts now. So. God, that was long. I think that's the longest one I've ever given.
We'll just be alternating one question from the floor and the online audience.
Yep. Yeah, hi, that was a great talk. You said about you have two things. You have the outward flow, right?
Yep.
And which can hinder your jhana, achieving jhana.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, like most of us, we have bills to pay, we got mortgages, and we've got to do the outward. We've got jobs or whatever, or businesses or whatever. So can the two live together in oneself, or and I'm sure this is true in Thailand as well, where they also have bills to pay and all that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So is it possible for both to live together in oneself?
Yeah. So, essentially when we talk about like outflowing things and things that are outside in the world, remember what we're talking about is developing states of meditation. So obviously there's things that you have to do in the world, there's bills you have to pay, you have to go to jobs and all these kinds of things, but the time that you're meditating, that's a different thing. You're sitting down to meditate, so instead of the mind going out into the world, you're trying to bring the mind in closer and closer and closer. So it is possible to actually operate in the world, do these things in the external world, but also be bringing the mind in at the same time. Obviously, when there's problems to think about, there's plans to make, you make those plans. But when you're practicing Dhamma and you're practicing meditation, you're trying to bring all that in. You're trying to let go some of those things. And again, if you remember from what I said, with, say, for example, in the Thai forest tradition, you're internally reciting Buddho all the time. So even when you're actually engaged in the world and doing things in the world, you can always be reciting Buddho in your mind. I'm sure you've had the experience where you're talking to someone and it's like, but your mind's like thinking of something else. Most of the time when I'm talking to people, it's like, I'm thinking of something else entirely. So part of that training is you can still mentally recite Buddho in the mind while you're talking to people and doing things, or you could be watching the breath as you're going about your daily activities in the world. Now, obviously, if one goes into a monastic setting or goes off onto retreat, it's a lot easier to do these things and have these periods where you can bring the mind in. But that doesn't mean that you can't operate in the world as a layperson and actually develop these same kinds of states. You don't need to be a monastic to access these things. Again, it's within the purview of human capabilities. So whether one is a monk or whether one is a layperson, it doesn't really matter. What matters is your own development. And that's the thing with these states, developing these states, many lay people can actually get them as well, that have jobs, have all these kinds of things. And so they're there for us to actually access. So you can access. So even though you're engaged in the world, you still can be doing these things. But especially when you're meditating, okay, I'm dropping the world, let the world go, don't worry about it, and I focus more on these things. Does that answer the question? Or?
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I think if more people in this world do that, achieve that kind of state, that would solve a lot of problems in my view.
But it'd be awesome. It'd be awesome.
Problems as well, yeah.
Yeah, and as a lot of people ask me about this. They sort of say, well, what if everybody did this? Like we'd get nowhere in society. It'd be useless. It's like you just have these like kind of zombies that are like Buddho. This. What happens if everybody becomes enlightened? How does society operate? And my response to this is like, it's not going to happen. Like, don't worry. Like, it's not easy to get these things, so it's okay. Not everybody's going to get it. But again, I think as a Dhamma practitioner, it's something you should be aiming for.
Yeah, but I think if it does happen, we'd solve a lot of problems. We'd solve all of our environmental crises.
For sure.
Stuff like that,
But hopefully, at least everybody in this room can do it. That's let's start there. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Ajahn. So a lot of people are wondering about the word Buddho, so I'll combine a couple of questions into one.
Yep.
So just wondering how it's spelled and whether it's Buddho or Buddha, and what the meaning of Buddho is.
So Buddho, so essentially Buddho is a mantra one would use, the silent repetition of this word over and over again in your mind. Buddho. What Buddho means is the awakened one. It's just an epithet for the Buddha. So it's just another word for the Buddha. It can also be translated as an awakened state of mind, an awakening of the mind. So it's how it's used a lot in the Thai forest tradition. It is also a recollection of the Buddha as well. So you can use it as either thinking of the Buddha himself, the awakened quality of the mind, or you can use it to think of the different qualities of the Buddha. At its root, what you're trying to do with the development of the mantra with it is just to recollect the word silently within your mind. You can use it to recollect on the qualities of the Buddha. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it can also mainly it's used just to develop this one-pointed focus and this one-pointed concentration. And how do you spell it? Buddho. And there's actually a book by one of the forest masters called Ajahn Sādaro, and he goes into quite a lot of detail explaining what Buddho is and how one develops that in the meditation. Was there another part of that question that I forgot?
No, I think you covered pretty much. Yeah.
Bhante, you described very clearly the samatha bhavana in various interpretations from Thai and other traditions, various stages of samadhi. The samatha meditation practice is not unique to Buddha's ultimate practice of liberation from samsara, but it is useful to start,
Sure.
and it is practiced by Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and yogis, and it gives a lot of bliss and joy and tranquility. But if you, to get to that, as you said earlier, you have to suppress your defilements. You have to have kilesa. So a lot of people have kilesas in various levels and intensity. And most of the people who try to do this, they suppress them. Not that they have thinned it, or you can only thin it by wisdom. So you don't have to have much wisdom, you suppress it by sheer energy or loving God or something like that. You just submit to something. Then you go to the next stage where you said that you don't see objects and non-duality and only see processes, no vichara. So at that stage, also when Buddha says that you don't have these hindrances coming, that is the stage. From that stage only you can use that stage to go sideways to develop wisdom, to see the world from within, to see how the world works, like without seeing anicca dukkha anattma, you see that in everything. That is the path that leads to liberation from wisdom and eventual nibbana. If you go further up in samatha, you get a more blissful states, and you see that you're with everything and see God and all that stuff. And it's a blissful state. And but when you finish that, you are back to square one, and you haven't gone anywhere. So it is a very useful practice for those who have developed wisdom and gone further in the path of vipassana meditation and develop wisdom to come to this stage and to enjoy the bliss of samatha. And Buddha and the Arahats did that all the time. That is their retreat. They have. It's a great thing for the wise people who have Arahats and Buddha. They enjoyed these states. That's how they got the rest, not by sleeping, get in this samadhi state. So we have to understand, Anancha says that you don't have to go up to the fourth level.
For sure.
From halfway, go towards the developing wisdom. That is the end game in Buddhist practice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a good point that... and maybe I didn't make it. But essentially, when we think about these things, and especially in the Thai forest tradition, we talk a lot about that. It's not the end goal to develop these states. It is a very, very useful tool to get towards the end goal. The end goal actually is to develop wisdom, and the refinement of the mind from wisdom is even more refined than actually developing these states of samadhi. Now, one thing that I always have really liked about the Thai forest interpretation of, well, how much should I develop? Should I develop these, should I develop the Anapanasati? Should I develop, or should I move into developing the Arupa Jhanas? Should I develop the Sunyata Samadhi? What you'll usually get, the answer you'll usually get is just however much you can get that. Like just whatever you can get, just do that. Whatever power or whatever strength you get of the mind from developing that kind of samadhi, then use that to develop wisdom. Again, it's a symbiotic thing. Use them back and forth. So whatever level of samadhi you got, that's great. That's fine. That's okay. Whatever it is, that's okay. Use that to develop some wisdom. The better your wisdom becomes, it'll support that samadhi more, and the samadhi will become deeper and deeper. The deeper the samadhi gets, the more profound and refined that the wisdom will actually become. And so these things support each other. So it's not like you have to get to this kind of state first and then develop wisdom. It's like, no, you develop them in tandem all the way. Again, these kinds of states, what they do is give the mind enough refinement and enough strength and enough power to fully penetrate with discerning wisdom into the nature of the mind and into the nature of the different defilements that are the kilesas that are within the mind. But again, you don't have to go, well, I need to, okay, Nagarjuna's conceptualization is awesome. Animita samadhi. I need to get animita samadhi before I even bother doing anything else. No, just again, practice with whatever you've got, whatever tools that you've actually got. Use those tools. Whatever strength that you've got to lift something, lift that thing with the strength that you've got. So yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, maybe time for one more question online and one more question in the room. Yep.
Thank you, Ajahn. So someone's asking, what you said about using Buddha as a mantra, I noticed too that I can keep doing the mantra, but think about everything but the mantra.
Yeah.
So should I just keep doing it?
It's the trap. It's when you get really good at doing Buddha, it's like I can Buddha. Yeah, what am I going to eat for lunch as well? Buddha. So the first thing is, it's better than not doing it. It's better than not actually having it. So even if you're doing something like repeating Buddha, but you're starting to move off into thought, or say for example you're maybe watching the breath, but you're also maybe thinking of something else as well, that's better than not doing it at all. So lean into that a little bit more, of trying to do it more and maybe having these other thoughts and things come up. If you're moving throughout the world and you're watching the breath, or you're repeating Buddha, or maybe you're still thinking of other things, that's not so bad at the moment. Don't worry about that. What'll happen is, though, the more you practice this and you're sort of swinging in and out between the Buddha and the thoughts, is that when you actually start to sit, it'll be easier for you to make the Buddha louder, maybe. And the louder you can make that within your own mind, then the actual thoughts start to, those other sort of extraneous thoughts, they start to drop away. So while there is that experience you can have of, okay, there's the Buddha, or there's I'm watching the breath and the thoughts are still coming up, keep with it, keep at it. And what will end up happening is the scales, the weighting of the Buddha or the thoughts will start to move. At times, Buddha will start to overtake the thoughts more, and the thoughts start to drop away. So thought starts to drop away more and more and more. Buddha becomes more profound, and then you can drop into these states of stillness. Other times, the thoughts are going to be more, and the Buddha's not so. The thoughts are louder, and the Buddha's not so loud. But that's fine. Just try to keep it going, or try to keep the awareness of the breath going. It's better than not. Again, the take-home point here is it's better than not doing it at all. So even if it seems like it's weak, then that's okay. The more you do it, the stronger it will become. Like everything, the more you practice this thing, the better and better you'll get at it, and the more you'll be able to do it. So, yeah. So maybe one other question. We'll call it a day.
Yes, thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Continuing on the theme of Buddha today, what do you think it is about that simple recitation of a simple mantra that induces these kind of states? I mean, in other traditions, like Zen tradition, an answer to certain koans is mu, which is not, which struck me as kind of different but similar in its use. What do you think it is about that recitation that gets one there? Yeah, so there is something about developing single pointedness of mind, and it's a very useful tool to develop that single pointedness of mind, because you're just repeating the one thing over and over and over and over. So that whole practice is geared towards single pointedness of mind.
Now, with something like developing koans, and also, in a way, you're sort of, it's a little bit of a similar kind of process where you're repeating the koan to yourself over and over again. So it might be more spaced out, but you're, in essence, in a way, trying to develop the same thing. Something with the mantra, it's just more like a machine gun kind of thing. So it's like you're trying to rip a hole in the floor or something. It's like using, this is a bad analogy. I'm going to lean into it. I'm already there. So it's like jackhammer. Jackhammer's a better one. And so like a jackhammer, you're trying to like smash into the floor and break it. It's continually going. It's continually going. There's no room for it to move. Whereas maybe something like the koan is, I can't think of another power tool now. But maybe it's something that's more like, I don't know, dropping a stick of dynamite on it. This is a bad analogy. I'm really sorry. But essentially the mantra repetition, it's more rapid fire. Whereas the koan is, there's a bit more space. There's a bit more space in it, but it's sort of leading towards the same thing of repeating the same thing over again and arriving at a non-answer or an answer. So I think it's just, the reason it's conducive is because you just don't have as much room to move. So with something like the koan, if you're already reasonably calm, something like the koan can work quite well because, the mind is already stilled to some extent. And so it's easier to repeat the koan and tap into that. Whereas maybe if the mind is a little bit more perturbed, repeating this mantra is just going to cut through that like perturbed nature of the mind. And so, yeah, does that answer the question or?
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Cool. Okay, with that, it's time for me to eat something. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. And so you've done all the announcements? All the announcements are done? Yeah, there's enough announcements. So with that, we'll pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and you're all more than welcome to come over and offer bindabat. And you can ask me the question after. Oh, you got an announcement. Okay. Yep.
I just wanted to say I hope that you read in the newsletter that we're starting the archives project today. So we're looking for old photos, back to the perhaps the 80s and onwards, and any press releases or flyers. We're just trying to get a sort of history of the BSV together. So if you did see that and you've brought in some photos, please bring them up to the library after the meal. But if you're not staying for the meal, see myself or Yasmin now. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Anybody maybe online that didn't hear that? If you have old BSV memorabilia, cuttings, anything, any kind of information, please get in touch maybe somehow with Yasmin. You can do it through the BSV website, I'm guessing. Secretary at BSV. If you do have any BSV memorabilia, photos, all these kinds of things, that will be awesome. Okay, so we'll pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and we can go over and do the Bindabata. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivandemi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami